It's time for the scoreboard with Greg Glasscock.
Welcome to this week's edition of Beyond the Blitz and Scoreboard, here along with Mr. Greg Glasscock. Welcome along, Mr. Greg. How are you?
Great, Chris. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well, just looking into what we've got going on this week for football, and then looking back over last week. So it's been a pretty interesting past weekend, that's for sure. So
yeah, we're really getting to the nitty-gritty now.
Definitely. So, well, let's jump right into it. We're going to cover some of the games from the area, and then we're going to get into these main games from Region 8 and start looking at some of the playoff picture as we get through this. So last week, we'll just start off with the teams that were on their bye week. Arab was the only one last week that was on a bye week. They were part of the Region 8, but out of all the schools in the area, they were the only one that was off last week. So jumping over in DeKalb County, you had Whitesburg Christian was visiting Fife. Fife would win that 62-21. North Jackson would visit Plainview, and that was a pretty big game there. Plainview ended up coming back from behind there, would end up winning that game 35-24. Brindley Mountain was at Geraldine. Geraldine would win that game 63-0. Asbury would visit Holly Pond. Holly Pond would win 42-0. St. John Paul II was the DAR, and they won 44-13. Huntsville would come into Iberville for homecoming, and this would be Iberville's first game after their big win at Grissom a couple weeks ago, but they would lose that one. Huntsville's full homecoming. They'd win that one 34-0. And then now we're going to jump over into the 5A, the Region 7 game. The ones we've really been trying to track are some of these top 3-4 teams in Region 7. Fairview and Priceville would face off against one another, Greg, in this 1-2 slot to see who's going to be the top of the region coming out of Week 7. And Fairview would win this one pretty convincingly. They would end up winning it 28-9. Harper, the senior running back, would have another pretty decent game. He'd have 20 carries for 136 yards and 2 TDs. But another kid, and watching the film, that really stood out to me was a senior, number 21, Jace Stevens. Had a big receiving game for them. He had 2 catches, one that was for 36 yards, another for 64. Overall on the night, he was 5 catches for 113 yards and 2 TDs. One of the plays he called that 64-yarder was off a little screen pass out of the backfield there. So they're Fairview. Looking at Fairview's a pretty formidable opponent. Got a lot of size on both the offensive and defensive line. A lot of big boys down there. So even their linebackers, they've got a really big couple linebackers there. So seeing who comes out of Region 8 have to face them in first round of playoffs is going to be interesting. But this week they're traveling to Sardis, so kind of get to see how they play against some of our Region 8 teams and see what they do. So next game would be the Douglas Sardis game. This is a pretty big game here for us on the bottom half there of Region 8. Sardis to jump out early on a 7-0 there with a 29-yard TD pass. But then they would intercept the ball on their own end zone, but it would get called back for pass interference. And Douglas would get the ball back and turn right around and score from 10 yards out on a Baker Lyles rushing touchdown. They would tie it up with a minute left to go in the first quarter. Sardis would end up making a quick drive down still in the first quarter there, and would end up scoring on an 8-yard TD run to go up 13-7 after the missed PAT. Douglas would then just kind of slowly creep their way back into this game. They'd have a big pass play to Stewart for 62 yards that would flip the field. Later set up a field goal to make it 13-7 at the half, but Douglas would miss that field goal going into the half. So that would end there. But when they come out in the second half, it was like two totally different teams. Douglas jumped out, scored on a long TD run to go up 14-13 with 4.5 left in the third. Green would break 3 tackles and take it 44 yards for a TD with 4 minutes left in the third. And that's what would put them up there on that 14-13 lead there. And then Douglas wouldn't look back. They would end up having an interception later on at midfield and would score again in the third quarter. on a 33-yard TD pass from Lyles to Crenshaw to go up 21-13. Then Lyles would connect with Murray on a 69-yard TD to go up 28-13 with 2 minutes left in the third quarter. And then it was just pretty much Douglas from there. They would end up winning that game 35-21. Now, Sardis made their way back. They got it 28-21 and was doing pretty good there, holding them. But Lyles would drive down there with a little under 2 minutes left to go up 35-21 there to win that game on a 2-yard TD run. So Douglas would pull that one out, leaving Sardis still at winless in the region at 0-5. Boaz would travel to Brewer. This would end up being a pretty interesting game, Greg. It was very low scoring, which kind of put that a little more in Boaz's favor. But on the second play of the game, Boaz would run a reverse pass for a 70-yard TD and go up 7-0 with 11 minutes left in the first. Brewer would fumble on the opening drive that they had the ball on Boaz's 35-yard line. Boaz would then turn around and drive down and turn the ball over in the red zone. Brewer would work their way back, would hit a 38-yard pass on a 3rd and 6 to get it on the 3-yard line and would score later on the quarterback rush, but would miss the PAT to make it 7-6. That's where we would go into halftime. They'd come out of the half. Boaz would recover a fumble and return it 35 yards for a touchdown to go up 14-6 with 11 minutes in the third quarter. Then Boaz would go up again with a 34-yard field goal to go up 17-6 with 7 minutes left. Brewer would score on an 18-yard pass that they would fail the 2-point PAT, and the score would be 17-12 with 10 minutes left to go in the game. Now, from here, you'd think Boaz would pretty much kind of control it, but just as we've saw out of Brewer lately, they turn into this fourth quarter team, and it just gets crazy in this last fourth quarter here. And Brewer would hit a 65-yard pick six on Boaz and turn around and convert the PAT to go up 19-17 with 7 minutes left to go in the game in the fourth quarter there. But Fant would end up scoring from 3 yards out on a dive play to put Boaz up 23-19, and that would pretty much seal it for Boaz there late in the game, and they would win that one. Fant would end up having not a very big game that night. Brewer done a pretty good job of containing him. He was 25 carries for 70 yards and 1 TD. But Bo Bennett had a pretty good game for him. He was 14-19 for 124 yards and had 1 INT. But Boaz had the big turnover battle win. They were 2-1 on that. So that played pretty favorable for Boaz on that there. So that'll carry us into this last game here that we're covering for last week. This was kind of our game of the week, Greg. Me and you both were at this game. The Guntersville-Scottsboro game, this was for who's going to be number one in the region, because this was the 1-2 punch here last week, and would kind of seal, I don't want to say seal it up, but it would definitely put it in their favor to win out. If you win out, you're going to be the number 1 seed in Region 8. So Greg, if you would just go ahead and give us what you had up there. You were calling this game on the radio there for us, so let's hear what all you had there.
Yeah, not exactly the best of starts for Guntersville, as Scottsboro won the toss and deferred to the second half, and Guntersville fumbled on the first play from scrimmage. So gave Scottsboro a short field right away. They had it inside around the 30-yard line or so, and who ended up being the star of the game, you'll hear his name a lot, Jacoby Edmondson, scored his first of 4 touchdowns from 4 yards out, and just a couple minutes into the game, Scottsboro was up 7-0. But you have to give Guntersville credit. They drove right back, a 12-play, 80-yard drive, and quarterback Street Smith from 2 yards out tied it up at 7. And I was a bit surprised on how Guntersville overall was able to run on the Scottsboro defense, especially in the first half. That really surprised me. So we're tied at 7. And then the second quarter, Brandon Manganeras hit a big 44-yard field goal for Guntersville to go up 10-7. They traded field goals for halftime. Scottsboro has a very good kicker themselves in Cole Rochelle. He kicked one from 30 yards to make it 10-10 at half. And going into halftime, I thought it was a pretty evenly played half. You know, I always hate to gripe about the officiating, but there were two or three huge non-delayed games that were not called against Scottsboro. And one of them was real big because if you remember, Chris, this is when Guntersville was up 10-7. Scottsboro had what seemed like a third and forever at about their 30-yard line or so, and they went to some trickeration because they really couldn't move the ball that much. A halfback pass and ended up getting them like around the Guntersville 35 or so that led to the tying field goal. But that was clearly after the clock hit 0, so it should have been third and even longer. And who knows what would have happened with another snap. They might have done it again, or they might have been fourth down having to punt, but I thought that was huge. And then on the field goal, should have been another delay of game, but their kicker's so good, you know, you could say, well, 5 yards further out, he'd make it, but then it could be blocked or you don't know. So, yeah, a couple big non-delay of game calls went against Guntersville. So they went into the locker room 10-10, and I even said on the air, the first drive of the second half was huge. And Scottsboro got the ball, and they ate up roughly half of the third quarter clock. Ended up scoring once again. Jacoby Edmondson 5 yards out, 17-10. Brandon Manganeris, a 24-yard field goal, made it 17-13. And then late in the third, Chris, I really think this was the backbreaker when Edmondson went right up the gut on a 74-yard touchdown run at the end of the third quarter. It was 24-13. And I was thinking to myself, this one might be over. And then in the fourth quarter, Edmondson, a 1-yard run to kind of cap off the night. And Scottsboro ended up winning 31-13. I really think in the second half, you got to give a lot of credit to Scottsboro and their O-line and D-line. I think they just really wore Guntersville down in the second half.
Yeah, and Edmondson ended up breaking he ended up having over 300 yards for the night. 294, 4 touchdowns, so huge night for him. And then they ended up announcing he ended up being the number 2 overall rusher. Wasn't it what they said in school history that night?
I think so. I thought I heard them say, which is hard for me to hear PA announcements, but I heard something about he had broke over 4,000 yards senior. And then they also announced one of their DBs that's real good. And I want to say, you might want to double check me, I think he's just a sophomore, Connor Vaden, number 28, had 2 interceptions and really should have had 2 more. And I think he's got 10 this year, which is either tying or is a Scottsboro single season record.
It ties a single season record. I remember that side of it. They said season record at 10.
I think he's just a sophomore, if I remember the roster correctly. So that's pretty impressive by a sophomore to have 10 interceptions.
Oh, definitely.
So, you know, my hat's off to Scottsboro. They did what they had to do. They battled back from quite frankly, an embarrassing loss to Brewer. And coming home, I even heard Coach Van, that was on the scoreboard show, mention that, you know, it was a tough week, tough weekend, tough week. He even said that he didn't take any phone calls from people or stuff. I mean, you know, he was sick, and they were just all in how you respond. And they responded well. Now Guntersville has to do the same thing. I'm sure we'll get into the playoff scenarios and the seeding, but basically Guntersville's in a must-win to host in the playoffs, as they hadn't been at home in 4 weeks, and they come home for senior night to play Boaz. And they both have the same overall and region record, and that's going to be a huge game. So it'll be interesting to see how Guntersville responds after getting punched in the mouth in that second half.
Yeah, it definitely is going to be an interesting game. Like you said, Scottsboro looked totally different than what they looked against Brewer. I don't know what happened with them in this Brewer game, but they did not look like this, especially in the second half. I know me and you talked at halftime, and it was such a close game then. We said it's going to all come down to whoever makes the adjustments here. And could tell clearly Scottsboro made the adjustments, and that was one of my big things. Like I was telling some people that was sitting beside of me, and I think I maybe mentioned it to you, that the big thing for Scottsboro is if they wanted to win the game, they had to give the ball to. They was going to have to put it in his hands because Guntersville had struggled stopping him early. And I felt like if they could put it in Two's hand, he was going to be the one to win them the game. And when he broke that 74-yarder, I felt like that pretty much iced it for him myself. So,
and something that really frustrated me too, being on the call, is you could see that Scottsboro was only going to run several different plays. They really remind me a lot of A-Rab. Really, I joked around on the air saying when they play each other next week, that could be the fastest game in high school history, because there's going to be a lot of running the ball. And, number two's going to get it, but what's frustrating is still couldn't stop him, which that's a lot of credit to the offensive line of Scottsboro. And they were huge. Both their lines are huge. So, I know you saw some footage of the Brewer game. I never did see it. To me, that's a bit of a head scratcher, other than the fact you're dealing with a lot of teenagers. Because, how you lose at homecoming to Brewer and then come and dominate a ranked Guntersville team 1 week later, I don't see how you do it other than just refocusing, really. I don't know.
Yeah, but it's like me and you had kind of talked. If you go back and look at that Brewer game, Brewer hit several really big, long pass plays on Scottsboro and their secondary. And at Guntersville, I think they maybe only have 2 or 3 big pass plays down there. They pretty much shut down y'all's best receiver you had there.
They did a great job on him, but what gets me is, you figure people are going to double team him. Guntersville has really up to 4 legit receivers. So I'm thinking, and I don't want to be critical of them at all, but, I keep wondering, I've even said it on the air before, I don't understand why they don't utilize the pass more than they do, because people are open and they've got several receivers. So, I've never been a football coach a day in my life and probably never will, but, with Camp Green still out, even though he did play on defense some, he's not well enough to run the ball. I think you're going to have to, teams that started with Grissom, they loaded the box. Boaz might do the same this week. I don't know. I think you've got to go to the air. I mean, I hate to say to win a game, they've got to totally go to the air, but I think they're going to have to throw 20, 25 times a game.
Yeah,
I really do. And Scottsboro's secondary was good, especially who we just talked about, number 28. But, he's not all over the field. And just like Guntersville, they've got more than one receiver. So I just really felt like Guntersville in that game really needed to go to the air more than they did. But that's just my little old measly opinion on that.
Yeah, and speaking of 28, if the roster's correct, based off what I'm seeing, he is a sophomore.
What I thought, yeah,
that's pretty impressive for him. So, but yeah, I honestly felt like, based off all the film I had saw coming into the Scottsboro game with Guntersville last week, I felt like Guntersville, if they passed, they should be able to win that game. Me and you had talked about it, and that's what I kept saying the whole time. I felt like if Guntersville could pass on them, they should win that game pretty easily. For whatever reason, they didn't pass a whole lot against them, and the times they did, they were gaining ground. That's when they really put the ball down the field. But the key thing there was they just could not slow down. They did not have an answer for number 2.
No, did not.
Turn into a shootout with them. So, but
pretty interesting week this week. Couple of huge Region 8 games.
Definitely. So with that, let's transition to Week 8. Let's look at what we've got. So this week, let's start out in some of our other games. So we'll go ahead and start with the teams that are on bye weeks or they're off this week. So Geraldine will be off this week, as well as DAR will be. Fife will travel to Holly Pond. Plainview will travel to New Hope. Collins will travel to Brindley Mountain. Sylvania's going to travel to Asbury. Aberville will go to Bob Jones. I'm telling you, they're in the gauntlet now. I was talking about that with somebody yesterday. You come straight out of Huntsville, go straight into Bob Jones after that win. That's tough.
I hope they enjoyed the Grissom win, because it back to 7A play. It's going to be tough for them to probably get another game.
Yeah, you don't have nobody else that you can play against that you're going to have. And when I say this, I'm not saying you're going to have to play down against Guntersville in 5A. The 7A opponents you got the next 3 weeks they're going to be tough for them to be able to pull something off there. If they do, hey, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to congratulate them, because that would be, because like I said, this week with Bob Jones is going to be tough. So definitely a tough game. And next week they've got James Clements to throw on top of all that. So, that's the two worst teams you can come rolling into in the last few weeks there. So, so then this week, like we were mentioning earlier, so you got the cross in Region 7 there, 5A. You got Fairview, which is a top 5 ranked team. I haven't seen the top 10 standings for 5A yet come out. But Fairview's going to be, they were top 3 last week, so they should be in the top 3 again with their win over Priceville. They're going to go to Sardis. Couple key things in this game for Sardis. Sardis has got to slow down that running back with Harper if they're even going to remotely have a chance. They're going to have to keep him under 100 yards. If they don't, they ain't got a chance to beat him. He's basically the motor behind that offense. So, but that's going to be the key there for Sardis to even having a shot. So, going to the Brewer-Douglas game, you got Brewers going to Douglas. So just a couple things for this one, looking into it for Douglas to really kind of have a shot, just looking at it based off of what we saw. And Greg, if you've got anything on this, you see a few things I saw with Douglas. They've got to minimize the big plays, especially the big pass plays. They give up several big pass plays in the season. They're going to need 250 yards plus out rushing as a team. When they've done that, they've won. And they've got to win the turnover battle. The last couple games they've had, I know this last week with Sardis, they didn't have as many turnovers, but in that loss that they had to Arab, they had 5 turnovers and didn't get a turnover at all. So that cost them big. And then with Brewer, they're going to have to minimize penalties. They'll have almost 10 penalties or more a game. They've got to score early and score fast, put a lot of pressure on Douglas's offense and defense to have to adjust and answer back. But they especially need another big game out of their QB like what they had against Scottsboro. And he had a pretty good game against Boaz. They just run out of firepower there towards the end of the game. So some penalties and stuff cost them. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that game.
Well, yeah, of course, I've seen Brewer in person. Douglas I'll get to see next week. But it sounds like to me this game could be high scoring, could be a bit of an air raid between Lyles and I forgot the Brewer's quarterback's name. I mean, it's the ball's going to go in the air a lot. I would almost call this game really a bit of a toss-up. Initially, you'd say Douglas, but I mean, you see what Brewer's capable of with going to Scottsboro and winning, and then having chances against Boaz last week, and it is Douglas's homecoming, so it should be a good one. I really see, Chris, that one going either way.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say either team is a solid favorite.
No, I'm 100% agreeing with you. I think it's going to be a shootout. And the quarterback is Drinkard, is who the quarterback is from Brewer, and I'm with you. I think between him and Lyles, it's going to be a shootout between the two of them.
I think you're looking at a 40-something, 30-something game probably, somewhere in that range, if not higher.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if I'm putting over-under on this game, it's 70 points.
Yeah.
It's 70 points. It's just going to come down to, I honestly think it's going to come down to whoever's defense can have a stop. And I'm curious with Brewer being that Brewer's had some pretty good games where they've slowed running backs down, like with Boaz. They slowed number 2 down a little bit against Scottsboro, which is what really helped them win that game. They just they didn't have the firepower really to kind of slow down the passing game Scottsboro put up against them. So I'm curious to see what their defense does in this rushing attack that Douglas has, So it should be a pretty good game, but if I'm putting an over-under on it, I'm going to put 70 up there as the over-under for this one. So
Probably go over 70.
Yeah. So looking at the Scottsboro Arab game, so we'll look at that one. So a couple things looking at that one. For Arab, they've got to slow down or at least stop number 2. If he has a big game, it's going to be trouble. They've got to keep him under 100 yards, at least under 150. If he gets more than that, it's going to be bad. They got to stay out of 3rd and long situations. That's tend to creep up on them a lot because they can't get the running game going early. So they're going to have to get the running game going early and set the pace. They really need 150 yards out of Hudson if they can get it. Okay, can do that. That's going to kill a lot of the clock.
Yeah.
They're going to need a big game out of him. Period. And then they need to get a lot of pressure on the QB from the D line. The thing that's going to hurt is that I know it's out. I'm pretty sure it's out now, but they announced last week that John Loden, their number 0, he kind of bounces back and forth between linebacker and a D lineman. I think they mainly shifted him as a D lineman this year. He was one of the big guys that was getting a lot of pressure back there in the backfield. He's out for the year with a torn ACL. So he'll be done for the year. But for Scottsboro wise, they're going to need 200 plus yards rushing out of that running back. If they get that, they pretty much could probably seal that game up if they can do that. The defense has got to stop the run and put Arab in some 3rd and long, and they got to minimize turnovers. That's the big thing I see out of that game. Now, I don't know what your thoughts are, what you see out of that game for either one to win it.
Well, we talked about the over-under in the Douglas Brewer game being 70. I think the over-under in this one might be around 40. I think it's going to be a low scoring. I could easily see like a 28, 24, 21 type game or something or less. I think Edmondson will have a big game, but I do not think, especially if Arab is watching the film of last week's game, I don't think he's going to have a great game. I think he'll hit 100, but I don't think he's going to go for 294 like he did against Guntersville. I just don't think that's going to happen. A lot's going to depend on the health and how Hudson is. Neither team really likes to pass much, or it doesn't at least seem like either team is comfortable throwing much. If it's going to be the battle of the running backs with Scottsboro, I don't think either team is going to really throw it much. When we talk about Douglas and Brewer air raid, that whole game compared to this game, I think you have polar opposites, really. It'll be interesting, and oddly enough, you're going to have a lot of all things Guntersville fans being Arab fans on Friday night, because that will still give Guntersville an outside shot at winning the region if Scottsboro loses and then Guntersville wins out. So, should be a good game at Arab, and I think that's where you're going to be at, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Yep, that's where I'll be. I'll be covering that game, so
that'll be a good one.
Yep. Yeah, just looking at it, if we're putting an over-under on this one, I'm going to be honest with you, Greg. I'm going to say like you, I think it's 40, but I'm going to be honest. If Arab wants to win it, they have to keep Scottsboro under 30. They don't have the firepower, I think. They've only scored 31 points one time in this year, and every other time they've won, it's been by 20. They're only in the 20s.
Boy, Arab's defense, I really think they can hold Scottsboro in the 20s.
They're going to have to win this game, and just this is opinion. Okay, this is just my opinion. I think they have. It's got to be. This game has to be under 50. The total score has to be under 50 for them to have a shot to win.
I think there's a good chance of that.
So
really,
if it gets above 50, if Scottsboro scores 40 points, it's over.
Oh, forget it. Yeah.
And they scored 40 points multiple times this year. 3 times they scored 40. So, But if they can keep it to where that the overall score is under 50, I think they have a really good shot of winning it. So,
and overall, I think Arab's defense is probably every bit as good as Guntersville's defense. If you look at that first half of the game we were at last week, I mean, it was 10-10, and you look at it, Scottsboro's only touchdown was on the short field on the turnover, first play of the game.
Yep.
Their only other play was the field goal that maybe should have never been, with a delay of game on the trick play to get them down there. So, most part, Guntersville did a good job and basically shut them out in the first half, really, or pretty close to it. So, I don't see why Arab can't do the same thing, and they're at home. They're not having to go to Trammell Stadium. So,
yeah, I think if you do that, it's a 17-13 ball game. If you take those two, especially you take that one touchdown away that was early off of a turnover on the very first play of the game, that flips it. That makes it, that's 24-13 you lose by. So turnovers are going to be key in that game, and minimizing that for both teams. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. So,
are going to be very low in that game.
Oh yeah, definitely. I agree. I think it's going to be a low scoring game, and for the Arab fans, that's what they're wanting. That's what they're going to want. I think that's what it'll be, but we'll see. Number 2 is going to be the key on that. So going into this Boaz at Guntersville game, what's your thoughts on that? What are you seeing from Guntersville and Boaz, for each on this game for them?
Well, it'll be my first time to see Boaz in person. And, when you look at Boaz's schedule, yes, they're 6-1, but who have they really played? I mean, Scottsboro blew them out at home. I do have to give them credit for beating a very good Geraldine team at home and shutting them out. But when you look at Boaz's remaining games, it's at the top of the region. They still have left Guntersville and Arab, and then, of course, they played Scottsboro. Then they've already played, the Douglases, the Brewers, the Sardises. So, I think Coach Pruitt's doing a good job, and they're improving. I just don't know if Boaz has enough to go to Chorley and win. We'll see. Looking at it from the Guntersville side, kind of like where Scottsboro got a dose of reality with Brewer, and they did a great job and responded by beating Guntersville. Guntersville's going to have to do the same thing now. And from what I understand, it's going to be a rough week of practice. I mean, it totally is. And they'll be ready. It'll be senior night, last home game. Hadn't been at home in 4 weeks. So I think I'll be very disappointed if Guntersville's not ready. I think they will be. I do think they will win the game. I don't know how big. They have struggled a bit stopping the run, and you got Presley Fant, which is a very good running back. But I don't know how successful Boaz will be in the air against Guntersville's defense, because most people look at the Bennett to Bennett connection. And I know Guntersville will probably be ready for that. I don't know. It's kind of like with Guntersville. If you double team their big receiver, Dadrian Waller, they have 2 or 3 other guys that I think are almost as good as him. Boaz, outside of the Bennett, let's see, you got Bo, and then I think the receiver is Sage. Outside of him, and you'd probably know because you've seen them before, I don't know how their receiving core is. Do they have some other legitimate receivers other than Bennett?
They've got a couple of other guys, but it just seems like that their connections tend to be a lot of that Bennett to Bennett.
Yeah, and I think Guntersville can stop that.
Yeah, it'll be curious. It'd be interesting to see if he finds another connection in that game.
So I think they'll have to. I think it should be a good game, but I think Guntersville will definitely be ready and refocused. And the winner of that game is in the driver's seat to host, and the loser more than likely is going on the road. And another thing, a little bit of miscellaneous nugget. Boaz was Guntersville's only regular season loss last year while they had to travel to leagues. This game has been circled on the calendar since last year. So I expect Guntersville to be ready for this one.
Yeah, it's it's going to be a good game. I mean, you got this, and then the Arab Scottsboro game. Those are the top 4 teams, and it's going to pretty much shift. And you're going to know who 1-2 is coming out of this, and then you're going to know who 3-4 is.
Yep.
Then you're going to have pretty much from there 1-2 is going to decide who hosts what, and the 3 and 4 is going to figure out who's going to Fairview. So it's going to be tough. I mean, me looking at it like what you was saying, from Boaz's side to win this game, Fant's got to have a big game. He's got to have 175 yards or more rushing. The defense is going to have to slow down Street. I don't know if they can or not. They didn't. They kind of kept the guy from. They kept Drinkard from Brewer kind of occupied a little bit, but Boaz, when they played Scottsboro, they did. Scottsboro's quarterback just lit them up all night long. So, they're going to have to limit the third down conversions. They give up, they give up a bunch of third down conversions to Guntersville, and it's not going to be good. And then the big thing is it's going to come down to, like you were saying right there, is Bennett. What do they do with the quarterback with Bennett? Do they go back to what they started out earlier in the year, keep everything within 15 yards, or do they actually turn him loose to let him try to sling the ball down the field? That's going to be interesting. So,
well, I remember, Chris, in the game last year when Boaz won 42-35, Guntersville had a tough time with Fant, but also they had a quarterback by the name of Tyler Pierce. Yeah, nothing against Bennett, but a little bit different. So I really see in this game Boaz being more one-dimensional. I think Guntersville's going to force that. Fant might get his yards. But I just don't know how successful Bennett will be in the air. And if he's real successful, it could be a long night for Guntersville. Another concern of mine, too, for Boaz, I know each game stands on its own, but the last 2 games, they beat Sardis by 4 in a game where, quite frankly, they probably, we won't rehash it, but they probably shouldn't have won.
Yep.
I talked to a lot of Sardis people Saturday. They're still upset about that game, and they should be.
Yep.
And then they got away from Brewer with a 5-point win. So I wouldn't exactly say Boaz is playing their best ball right now. Of course, I could easily say Guntersville's not either. So it should be an interesting game, but being at home, I do like Guntersville in that game at home.
You also got to worry about the officials in this game, too, because in the last 2 games, both for Boaz and Guntersville's they didn't get the break on 2 calls on the delay of game, and Boaz got the big break against Sardis.
Right. So what crew's going to show up? Hopefully it'll be a very well officiated game, but Guntersville's had several games this year where they've had officiating that has clearly gone, against them. And of course people say, well, there's no reason for a crew to be intentionally against a team or whatever. I don't always buy that logic, I've been around this game too long and know too much. So hopefully it'll be a very clean game, well officiated game. Not only is it a region game, county game, should be a great crowd in Guntersville, and I'm looking forward to being on the call on it Friday night.
Yeah. I think from Guntersville's side to win it, they got to keep Fant minimized. They're going to have to slow him down. They're going to have to force Boaz to turn over the ball. That's a big one. If they can do that, that should pretty much help. If Street can have another 250+ yard passing game, they'll be fine. And the defense, like we talked about, y'all had Camp come back and he was playing defense, and he had several big stops for Guntersville last week, just playing defense and coming off of breaking his leg, 3 weeks ago, wasn't it?
It was against Sardis, the last home game, actually.
Yeah, so, he comes in and has, I remember one very vivid big play that he made there off the end. That was a huge play that stopped Scottsboro from actually scoring there in the first half. It caused them to have to kick the field goal. And, if they can put that kind of pressure, if Camp's in the game again and they can put that kind of pressure on Bennett, I think they can force some turnovers or at least put them in some third and longs to end up causing them to turn the ball over, or get the ball right back. So it's going to be, I think you've got to, it's going to come down to the quarterback play out of Bennett, what happens with him, and what kind of a game does Fant have rushing, as his side. So
injuries too. I mean, we're in week 7, 8, wherever we're at. Injuries are huge. I heard Fant's a bit beat up. For Guntersville, Camp's beat up. Their starting linebacker, the Mike linebacker, calls all the plays. Mason Bailey was in a boot all week with a sprained ankle and played. And on the very last play of the game against Scottsboro, he re-injured it and was carried off the field by 2 players on the final play that meant nothing.
I saw that.
So I don't know his status. I heard Street's beat up pretty bad, but he's a warrior. He'll play, which I understand this time of year. You're going to have guys beat up. So I feel like, in a way, Guntersville at key positions is a bit of a mash unit.
Yeah.
So that might come into play Friday night, too.
But, hey, man, when you're taking 25 and 30 carries a game, you're going to get beat up over time. And that's about what Fant's been averaging, is about 25 to 30 carries a game.
And then, you got Street. He loves to carry the ball himself at quarterback, and he also plays linebacker. So, I mean, it's not like when they don't have the ball, he sits drinking Gatorade. I mean, he plays all the time, so.
And he doesn't dodge contact. That's
booked for.
I see him all year, and I saw him in that Scottsboro game. He does not dodge contact. He wants the contact. He goes for it. So,
yeah. So, it'll be interesting.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be interesting. It'll be a good game. So, so that's where we'll end this week. Greg, anything else you want to throw in here on the close on this?
No, that's it. Looking forward to it. I guess next week, which will be the last week of region play for most teams, and Scottsboro will actually be on a bye. They will be done after Friday night. So maybe next week we can get into, if the picture's a little bit more clear, which I think it will be, maybe we can get in some preliminary possible pairings on the crossovers with Region 7 and 8. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, and we can look at that because, like we talked about, there's a high possibility that there's some of these teams that are going to play their cross in Week 10. Arab could possibly be playing the team they play in the first week of the playoffs, depending on if they win this week and next week, with Priceville coming in Week 10.
Wouldn't that be interesting?
Yeah, because Priceville's sitting in the driver's seat right now to host, if nothing changes. So it could be wild that you have Priceville back-to-back weeks right there. I don't know that I've ever heard of that happening, but I've not kept up with it just a ton, but over the years. But that'd be an interesting one. So
it'll be interesting too to see how well overall Region 8 does against Region 7 in the first round. I know a lot will depend on the matchups and where the games are at, but when you look at the teams, Fairview, of course, in Region 7, I think they've pretty much locked up the one, I want to say. Even though they have standings. And then somewhere in there, you've got, Russell Bull, Priceville. I think right now maybe West Point might be the 4, maybe.
They are.
So, right now you'd be looking at possibly West Point going to Scottsboro. I'd definitely say huge advantage Scottsboro. Fairview would host. I mean, right now we have no idea. It could very well, odds on, it might be Arab, could be Boaz. We'll know a lot more after this week, but Fairview's ranked 3rd. They've been great all year. It'll be interesting to see how the region shakes out against the crossover region. Because as a whole, and I was talking to somebody about this the other day, I think Region 8, I think as competitive as the region is, I want to say compared to last year, the region is actually down. But I think that's because you've had so many great players graduate. I mean, look at Arab losing Puccio and never thought I'd forget his name, the big tight end that went to Chattanooga. for Arab. Landon Strickland, them graduating, Guntersville with 2 D1 backs graduating, Boaz with Tyler Pearson folks graduating. So, Region 8 really got hit hard last year by graduation, but it was, this year with graduation. So last year, there was so much talent. I don't know what you think about the talent in Region 8 last year versus this year. But I do think it tends to be a little down this year, even though it is competitive.
The quarterbacks has been the big teller because you have 3 very young quarterbacks. Because you even look at, you throw Douglas in the picture. Douglas lost a senior quarterback. He's gone on. He's playing JUCO baseball right now. Boaz lost Pierce. Now they've got a freshman at quarterback. Arab lost Puccio. They've got a sophomore quarterback. Like what we talked about with Guntersville. Guntersville's going to lose Street after this year, So who do they have coming up next year to kind of carry this on, and everything? So, you could see where that there was a lot of the older hands, that has been leading these teams for a while now that have graduated out, and you're seeing that, and some of these younger guys are having to step up. So, but looking in this cross, I'm gonna be honest with you, Greg. If I'm having to travel, I don't want to be the 4 seed. I want to be the 3 seed because I feel like my chances are better against Priceville than they are at all against Fairview.
No doubt. I mean, I don't know if there is a team in the top 4 in Region 8. I think there's only one team in the top 4 that could go to Fairview and win. That's all that I think. I think everybody else would lose going to Fairview.
Yeah. Fairview's very tough. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't want to host Russellville. After what Russellville and Fairview, I don't want to host Russellville.
They're dangerous. And what is Russellville looking like right now? And are they 2 or 3 right now?
They're the 3 seed. They're tied. They're actually tied with Priceville in the 2-3 seed. So it's going to come down to who they play out. I'm not sure if they play each other. But it's going to come down to them 2 being the 2 or the 3 seed. But Russellville's only loss in the region was to Fairview.
I wouldn't want to play Russellville. I'd take my chances any day with, nothing against them, but I'd take my chances with Priceville over Russellville.
And it was 35-28. It was a close game. So it wasn't like, and Fairview went to Russellville and beat Russellville. So, still, you don't ever know. You get in playoffs, and you don't ever know what might happen. Like we talked about with injuries, you may roll in there in the week 1 of the playoffs and have a bunch of injuries, and it costs you. So it's going to be interesting. I'm curious to see, but like we talked about too, you win round 1, you got to move on into those crosses with either Region 5 or 6. Not sure, that's something we'll dig into this next week, and we'll report on next week. But you start getting out of round 1, you gonna have your hands full with some of them other teams with the Moody's and Leeds and stuff like that. So,
well, playoffs, you're not supposed to play a bunch of cupcakes.
Nope.
And you won't, because it'll just get tougher. So we'll see. It'll be interesting this week. I think when we're on here next week, we'll have a lot clearer picture of 1 through 4. I think. Now there might still be a couple things up for grabs, especially if Arab beats Scottsboro and Guntersville beats Boaz. Then the waters are muddied again a little bit. Then it would take, I guess, a Guntersville win at Douglas next week to sew up the 1 spot, if all that happens.
Yeah.
And then, so we'll see. I don't know if, the Scottsboro win, it's pretty cut and dry. They win the region.
Yeah.
But if Arab wins, and that kind of puts a kink in everything for another week.
What would be even wilder is if it was like Georgia is. Georgia does it where if you're in the top 32 in the overall rankings, you get in. And they rank them 1 through 32, kind of like March Madness. So 1 plays 32, 2 plays 31. It's not like it is with us. So if that was to ever flip here, you imagine how wild that would be coming down. You're waiting until the rankings after week 10 to figure out who you're playing.
That'd be a mess.
That's what all the teams in Georgia are going through right now. So that's something that they said that I think I don't know if that's this year or next year when they do that, but it's the top 32 teams in each classification. They're going into the playoffs. So, and they'll do 1 through 32 based off your ranking. It's not by region or anything like that anymore. It's based off how'd you rank in the state overall. So, damn. Well, all right, but well, Greg, I appreciate you joining us again this week, and enjoy your week. And we'll catch back up with you next week after these ball games, and we'll see where we're at in Region 8. So,
Sounds good.
all right, well, y'all have a good one, and we appreciate you for tuning in. And we just want to encourage you to like, follow, and share the page. Help us get the word out on this. We're only in our 4th week of doing this, so any help with getting this out, we'd appreciate it. If you see me and Greg at the ball games, just holler at us. I know we'd both love to sit down and talk to you about what little bit we know and gain any knowledge you might have. So, but y'all have a good week. We'll see you next week.
See y'all.